This is my title slide. I am Chris Ferguson and I am presenting this talk along with Gary Colquhoun, and it is on the regional deformation in the northeastern Lachlan Orogen. The Lachlan Orogen is of course part of the Tasmanides and quite widely developed throughout the Tasmanides. We have this latest Devonian to Carboniferous deformation known as the Canimblin orogeny. And this is particularly true of the Lachlan Orogen. And we're looking at the timing of regional deformation in the northeastern part of the Orogen. And this illustrates a general problem where we do not have deformational sedimentary successions, and instead we have to rely on map relationships and the available geochronology. So the issue has been in the northeastern Lachlan Orogen that the Helen Trough has been regarded as being affected by Middle Devonian basin inversion, as against the contrary opinion that the Helen Trough was deformed as part of this latest Devonian to Carboniferous regional deformation. Turning now to the northeast Lachlan Orogen, we have the Hill End Trough, shown there in the green to the north of the Bathurst granites, and the adjoining highs, the Molong and Kapiti highs, which are to the west and east of the Hill End Trough respectively. This paleogeography was determined by Gordon Packham, and if you look at maps of the region, the most obvious thing you'll see is abundant north trending folds that dominate the regional structure. Faulting is also present, but the role of faulting is more difficult to establish. Now, the important thing we have to note that relates to this controversy over the timing is that Upper Devonian successions are not developed are not found anywhere in the Hill End Trough, only on the Molong and Kapiti highs. We now turn to the timetable, the tectonic calendar, and we're going to look only at the Upper Devonian here. The Upper Devonian includes the Cotombal group and the Mount Knowles Lambie groups. Both these units only contain long-ranging fossils, so their ages are only very broadly constrained. You'll also notice that they overlap with a few Argon-Argon ages, and the suggestion we can draw from this is that there may be overlap between deformation and deposition of these Upper Devonian units. That's not something we have time to explore at the moment. That remains a possibility. Now, turning to the data that we've looked at for this work, in particular, we've been inspired by data collected by Gary Colquhoun in the 1990s. This data is very good. There's abundant structural data. The area has relatively high relief, and he's mapped out the formation boundaries in detail and collected abundant dips and strikes. What this data shows is that most of the units, most of the dips and strikes are fairly low in general, except in the southwest, and that unit boundaries are also relatively gently dipping. So it is topography that's controlling unit boundaries, not so much the structure. So we now go on to look at a cross-section across the northeastern Hill End Trough into the Kapiti High. And the Hill End Trough there is shown by the brown units. We see within that we have the typical upright tight folding that's developed in the Hill End Trough succession. And when we get onto the high, we have a more faulted succession with typically in the Devonian units relatively open folds. In fact, they're actually gentle. The interlimb angles are very high, and this also applies to the lower Devonian units. And we have the units between the lower and the upper Devonian are conformable. So this is showing us that the main deformation in this region in the Devonian post-dated deposition of the upper Devonian units. Moving now further south into the Hill End region, the sort of type locality where most work has been conducted on the Hill End Trough. We have, of course, these upright, tight isoclinal folds, much tighter folding than what we had further north on the Kapiti High. And of course, this is expected to some extent because we have a higher geothermal gradient. We're looking at deeper level structures, rocks that would have been more ductile and more susceptible to deformation. The timing, of course, is a matter of dispute because we don't have those upper Devonian rocks as we have developed on the highs. The only thing I would say is that it's difficult to see why the timing would change as you go from the Hill End Trough across to the Molong High, because especially further north, there's quite a transition between these, and you only really see the one set of regional folds. Moving now on to the Molong High, to the Black Rock Syncline, which is about 20 kilometres west of Orange. We've compiled this map from the available published information and also the Seamless Geology digital data set. And what this shows is that east of the Columbine Mountain Fault, we have a grossly conformable succession. We have Ordovician overlain by a relatively thin Silurian to Lower Devonian succession, and then overlain by the Upper Devonian. So you can see from the cross-section that the folding would be post-Upper Devonian, and in fact west of the Columbine Mountain Fault, the folding is even more open than it is to the east of the fault. Now the only potential sort of pre-Upper Devonian deformation of any significance would actually occur within the Ordovician at the base of those blue-coloured upper Ordovician limestones. Moving further north along the Molong High, we look at this larger region to the south of Wellington, and as is clear from the cross-section and also the map, there is one major set of north-south trending folds. And in the Mount Arthur syncline, the Upper Devonian is clearly affected by this folding. So the major deformation is post-Upper Devonian. It's also included faulting such as the Curragh Creek Fault, where the Lower Devonian is thrust over the Upper Devonian. And of course, the Molong High is gradational further east into the Hill End Trough, so we have quite a broad zone where this single set of major folds is developed. Now, of course, there is earlier deformation. The significance of this earlier deformation is not entirely clear, but it does not affect our general conclusion. So finally, to conclude, what we can say is that the Northern Kapiti High is affected by this latest Devonian to early Carboniferous deformation. Certainly in large areas along the high, this deformation is relatively weak, certainly much weaker than it appears in the adjoining Hill End Trough succession. On the Molong High, the situation is clearer. The Upper Devonian is quite tightly folded along with the underlying successions. However, we can't entirely rule out the possibility that there has been late Devonian basin inversion, especially when we look at the overlap of those Argon-Argon ages and the Upper Devonian successions. So more work is needed on this. Thank you for your attention.